Hi Evely, and I will tell you one story of a good viewing. Elias had always been an adventurer at heart, a seeker of the offbeat, a collector of stories and secrets. That autumn afternoon, with the sun sinking behind crooked pines and the wind whispering hints of long-forgotten tales, he found himself following an unmarked road that wound its way through a barren, almost spectral landscape. His GPS had long since given up on providing reliable directions, and the only guide was the rusted signpost that pointed vaguely toward a name he'd never heard before, Gallowmere. At first, the drive was eerily tranquil. The road, flanked by skeletal trees and abandoned barns, seemed suspended in time. The silence pressed in on him, a heavy, anticipatory hush that hinted at unseen presences. As dusk deepened, Elias noticed an unsettling anomaly, a series of dim, flickering lights in the distance. They were not the glow of any town he recognized, but something altogether more spectral, like a congregation of fireflies gathered in unnatural patterns. Intrigued, he took the turn signposted Gallowmere and soon found himself at the edge of a valley shrouded in mist and secrets. The village itself emerged from the gloom like a mirage, a cluster of dilapidated cottages, crooked chimneys, and narrow, winding lanes. Every structure bore the scars of neglect, its timbers warped by time and nature's relentless decay. Elias parked his car near a rusted iron gate, the entrance to a narrow, overgrown lane that seemed to beckon him inside with silent insistence. There was something almost magnetic about Gallowmere, a pull that transcended logic and stirred a deep, primitive curiosity within him. As he walked down the lane, the crunch of gravel underfoot echoed in the oppressive silence. Each step felt weighted, as if the very ground were reluctant to let him pass. Shadows danced at the periphery of his vision, and the murmuring wind appeared to carry soft, disjointed voices, snatches of conversation in a language he couldn't decipher. At one point, he paused before a door hung askew on its frame, its paint peeling like the remnants of a faded memory. The door creaked open at his touch, as if inviting him into a darkness that lay beyond. Inside, the interior was shrouded in a layer of dust and despair. Broken furniture and scattered relics hinted at lives abruptly abandoned. Elias's heart pounded in his chest as he pressed deeper into the village. The lanes twisted in unnatural patterns, looping back on themselves as though designed to confuse and trap unwary visitors. He could feel unseen eyes tracking his progress, a prickling sensation along the back of his neck that told him he was not alone. At one juncture, he glimpsed a figure disappearing around a corner, a fleeting silhouette in a threadbare coat. "Hello?" he called out, but the sound was absorbed by the dense, almost tangible atmosphere of desolation. Every building he passed seemed to harbor its own dark secret. In one particularly forlorn house, he discovered a wall covered with cryptic symbols and faded portraits. The eyes in the portraits, once full of life, now stared blankly as if they held witness to unspeakable horrors. A sudden chill swept over him, and for a moment Elias felt as though the very air had turned against him, a cold, creeping malice that made his skin crawl. The creeping dread intensified as night fell, and the village was bathed in a ghastly pallor. The silence was abruptly shattered by a distant, discordant melody, an out-of-tune lullaby that floated on the breeze. Elias followed the sound, his footsteps drawing him toward an ancient chapel at the heart of the village. The chapel's once proud steeple now jutted unevenly against the darkening sky, its stained glass windows shattered and smeared with grime. Inside, the pews were riven with decay, and in the center of the nave stood an altar draped in tattered cloth. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and something far fouler, a metallic tang that hinted at hidden, unspeakable rituals. As he stepped closer, the lullaby grew louder, more insistent, as if it were the voice of a long-dead soul calling him to witness its tragic tale. A figure, half-shrouded in shadow, moved at the far end of the chapel. For a moment, Elias thought he saw the glimmer of a tear glistening on the figure's cheek, a silent, mournful testament to sorrow and regret. But before he could speak or move, the figure vanished into the gloom, leaving behind only a trail of faint footprints that quickly dissolved into dust. Standing alone in the flickering candlelight, Elias felt the weight of centuries press down upon him. The village of Gallowmere was not a place for the living, it was a mausoleum of memories, cursed by events too terrible to recall. Each whisper in the dark, each creak of ancient wood, seemed to echo with the voices of the damned. With every heartbeat, the oppressive sense of foreboding deepened, and Elias realized that his arrival was no mere accident. Something in Gallowmere had been waiting for him, a fated encounter with horrors that defied the natural order. As the night crept on, Elias's resolve wavered. His instincts screamed for escape, yet the morbid allure of the village held him captive. With trembling hands, he fumbled for his camera, determined to document the uncanny sights and inexplicable phenomena. But as he raised the device, the soft lullaby swelled into a cacophony of despair, and the very walls seemed to pulsate with a malignant life. In that moment, he understood that Gallowmere was not simply abandoned, it was forsaken by the gods themselves, a cursed haven where hope went to die. Little did Elias know that the true terror was only beginning. Beyond the crumbling facades and into the labyrinthine back alleys, unspeakable secrets stirred, ready to unravel the fragile thread of his sanity. The night was far from over, and every shadow held the promise of an unforeseen horror. The cursed village had awakened, and its dark embrace was poised to claim another lost soul. Elias's trembling fingers could hardly hold the camera as he backed away from the eerie altar. The once soft lullaby had transformed into a discordant symphony of wails and hissing whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the chapel. His eyes darted around the darkness as the candle flames sputtered violently, casting twisted shadows that danced like the specters of lost souls. In that disorienting moment, he felt a crushing pressure, as if unseen hands were pressing him into the floor, compelling him to bear witness to a horror that defied understanding. A sudden crash echoed from the far end of the nave. Elias's heart pounded as he saw a sliver of movement, a shape, indistinct and malformed, slipping into a narrow corridor. Driven by equal parts dread and an inexplicable need to understand, he crept after it. The corridor, lined with ancient stone and layered in thick cobwebs, led him deeper into the bowels of Gallowmere. The oppressive darkness here was nearly tangible, swirling with an unseen malevolence that threatened to smother his every thought. Each step was accompanied by the soft crunch of debris underfoot, each echo amplifying the sense of inevitable doom. Before long, he emerged into a vast, open courtyard encircled by crumbling walls. The moon hung low, casting a ghostly luminescence over a scene that looked as though it were staged for a macabre play. Figures clad in tattered garments gathered in a loose, almost ritualistic pattern around a massive stone well. Their faces, obscured by shadows, moved with deliberate slowness, as if every gesture was laden with ancient grief. A low murmur filled the air, a chant that resonated deep in Elias's bones, evoking images of long-forgotten deities and a curse that had festered in this forsaken place for centuries. As he watched, one of the figures turned slowly toward him. Its eyes, sunken and reflective like dark pools, fixed upon him with a look of both sorrow and malice. A shudder ran through his body as he realized these were not mere specters but remnants of the villagers, souls ensnared by a curse so profound that death had not released them from its clutches. The chanting grew louder, more urgent, as if the village itself were summoning forces from the depths of its ancient torment. Elias's breath caught in his throat when one of the figures began to approach him. The figure's gait was unnaturally fluid, its limbs bending at impossible angles, and the faintest hint of a smile played at the corners of its mouth, a smile that spoke of cruelty and despair in equal measure. Instinctively, he raised his camera, snapping a frantic series of photographs. Each flash illuminated the grotesque features of the figure, a distorted face that seemed to merge human sorrow with inhuman cruelty. In that flash of light, the courtyard erupted into chaos. The assembled figures began to move in unison, their motions jerky and hypnotic. One by one, they converged on Elias with a slow, inexorable advance. The sound of their steps, synchronized like the beating of a monstrous heart, filled the air, and the chanting reached a fever pitch. Desperate to escape, Elias bolted toward a narrow archway, but the path behind him had vanished into a tangle of shadow and thorned vines, as if the village itself was reshaping to trap him. Panic surged as the figures closed in. Their hands, pale and skeletal, reached out, and from their lips came soft, distorted murmurs that resonated with an ancient malediction. Elias's vision blurred, the edge of his sanity frayed as he staggered back, clutching his chest. In a moment of horrified clarity, he understood the village of Gallowmere was not merely haunted by its dead but by an unspeakable force that thrived on terror, a presence that warped reality to its twisted design. With a final burst of energy, Elias darted into what he hoped was an escape route, a narrow, labyrinthine alley flanked by decaying stone walls. The oppressive darkness in the alley seemed to shift and writhe, as though alive, and every turn brought him face to face with remnants of a life once lived. A broken mirror reflecting a distorted visage, a rusted trinket glimmering in the moonlight like a shard of lost hope. Somewhere in the distance, the mournful sound of a piano tinkled out a minor chord, echoing across the desolation like a last farewell. Time lost all meaning as he ran, his pounding footsteps merging with the relentless chorus of the village's cursed inhabitants. The boundaries between nightmare and reality blurred, and Elias found himself trapped in a cycle of endless corridors and dead ends. With each turn, he encountered grotesque tableaus, a room where a banquet of abandoned food lay rotting on a table set for a feast, a narrow passage where walls were scrawled with frantic symbols that pulsed with a sickly light, and a staircase that descended into a chasm of impenetrable darkness. As exhaustion began to claim him, Elias stumbled into a vast underground chamber. Here, the air was thick with a cloying scent of decay and incense, and the walls were adorned with murals depicting scenes of terror and divine retribution. In the center of the chamber, a towering statue loomed, a figure cloaked in sorrow and fury, its eyes carved with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the veil of time. At the base of the statue lay a shallow pool of dark water, and in its depths, Elias could see reflections of his own terrified face, mingled with other, less human visages. In that moment, the ground trembled. The stone beneath his feet groaned as if in pain, and fissures began to snake through the floor. The chanting from above intensified, a maddening hymn that resonated with the very soul of the chamber. A spectral glow emanated from the pool, and slowly, tendrils of mist began to rise, coalescing into shapes that defied description. They swirled around the statue, encasing it in an aura of malignant power. Elias, paralyzed with horror, realized that these were not mere illusions, they were the essence of the curse that had bound Gallowmere for generations. In a crescendo of sound and fury, the chamber burst into a maelstrom of supernatural energy. The statue's eyes flared, and an unearthly wail filled the space, a lament for a lost civilization and a warning to those who dared disturb its eternal slumber. The walls wept with the agony of centuries, and Elias, caught in the vortex of this unfathomable power, felt his mind unraveling. Memories of a forgotten past mingled with visions of an apocalyptic future, and he understood, with a dawning clarity, that his fated arrival was not an accident but the culmination of a ritual as old as the cursed soil itself. As the spectral tendrils reached out to envelop him, Elias screamed, a sound swallowed by the darkness, leaving only the echo of his terror behind. The curse of Gallowmere was complete, and its ancient hunger was now irrevocably entwined with his soul. The village had claimed another victim, adding his story to its endless litany of despair. In that final, agonizing moment, as the light of his camera faded into oblivion, Elias became nothing more than a ghostly whisper in the haunted corridors of Gallowmere, a warning to all who might dare to wander down the Whispering Road. And so, as the cursed village settled back into its eternal night, the relentless cycle of horror continued, ever patient, ever waiting for the next lost soul to cross its threshold. Thank you very much, and see you all in the next video.